If you're out there trying to make sense of the world, whether you're managing a portfolio or just, trying to plan 5 years ahead, you know the feeling.
Hmm.
The information environment feels less like a river and more like a chaotic Category 5 hurricane.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Every headline, every data point, it seems designed to create maximum confusion, often right when you need the most clarity.
Well, that intentional complexity is actually precisely the starting point for the deep dive we're undertaking today.
Okay.
Our sources are the foundational materials of a consulting and advisory firm called AquaVis, and that's pronounced AquaVis.
AquaVis, got it.
And their entire premise is that this environment, this chaos, is deliberately designed to overload your circuits. They're trying to provide a shortcut to clear thinking.
And that philosophy seems to be baked right into the name, AquaVis. It literally means the natural force or power of water.
Exactly. They start by observing nature. They argue that its systems are, optimized for efficiency and resilience over millions of years.
So we should use those same natural principles to solve our really complex human-made problems.
It's pure biomimicry, but applied to global power systems and finance. They're saying the answers to our modern dilemmas aren't necessarily new ideas. They're the application of timeless natural laws. So our mission today is really to give you a clear snapshot of this firm, their unique methodology, and how they define the key forces shaping our world.
Okay, so let's unpack their core identity then, because it really starts with a pretty provocative diagnosis of the current global system.
It does.
The sources argue that the ruling order uses complexity not by accident, but as a deliberate method to generate confusion.
And that confusion leads to control. They see it as a tool of centralized power. If the foundational systems, how money really works, how power shifts, are just too complex for the average person to grasp.
Then you're disempowered. You're forced to rely on vested interests for any kind of guidance.
Exactly. So AquaVis's countermission, as they put it, is to simplify the complex. They want to use objective pattern recognition to connect the dots that the system actively tries to keep separate.
That idea that complexity is a tool for control is a really fascinating premise, and it defines their role, which they often describe using a powerful metaphor. They call themselves your river guide.
And that guide is navigating some serious whitewater right now. They stress that we're living through a period they call a fourth turning and a global power system realignment.
For listeners who might not be familiar with that term, a fourth turning is what? A concept from historical sociology?
Yeah, it describes the cyclical end of a generational era. It's typically a period of crisis, disruption, institutional failure, the kind of stuff that forces fundamental change.
It's, by definition, a chaotic time.
A very chaotic time. And that provides the urgent backdrop for why their mission to simplify matters so much right now. When everything's turbulent, you need a guide who has studied the currents.
And the principles they rely on reflect that need for clarity. They have a dual set of principles that shape their whole approach.
That's right. The first set is nature-inspired, focused on what they call the virtuous cycle. This includes things like being simple, efficient, fractal.
Balance-seeking, resilient, adaptable.
Yeah, and this is the key, self-reinforcing. They believe any successful system, whether it's biological or financial, must have these qualities.
I want to pause on that for a second. They pair this sort of natural resilience with a set of human-focused principles that seem designed to keep them accountable. They prioritize being authentic, transparent, and embracing something called Kaizen. Now, what exactly does Kaizen mean in this context?
Kaizen is a Japanese term. It basically means change for the better or continuous improvement.
Okay.
It implies a deep, constant commitment to learning and iteration. For AquaVis, it means their models are never static. They're constantly testing and refining them against real-world data. It stops them from becoming dogmatic.
Which is a common failure point for complex human systems.
A very common failure point. So you have this synthesis, the tested resilience of nature and the human rigor of constant improvement. And this leads right into their core mission and vision.
And their mission seems very focused on empowerment.
It is, first, boost awareness and understanding of the system's core building blocks. And second, improve financial health, which they explicitly view as a key pillar of your overall individual health. It provides stability.
And their vision follows from that, a more balanced financial ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's a huge goal, but it comes from challenging that centralized control we talked about.
Right.
So for you, the individual learner, what's the immediate tangible value here. How does this philosophy actually translate into results?
They're very clear about this. Their value proposition boils down to saving you three key resources. First, time, because they do the deep research. Second, energy, by filtering the noise.
And third, they compound money.
Right, which they define very powerfully as simply stored energy and time.
That makes perfect sense. In an environment of information overload, the most valuable thing is efficiency of attention.
Exactly. They want to be the best filter available so you can reallocate that saved time and mental energy. It goes right back to their nature-inspired principles. Nature doesn't waste energy.
It seeks the most efficient pathway.
That's what they try to model.
Okay, so that covers the why and the what. Let's pivot to the how, the machinery and the expertise behind this.
Yeah.
The sources say the team is driven by deep problem solving. But what specific complex systems have they actually mastered?
Their operational expertise is rooted in two intensely complex fields: semiconductors and investing.
Semiconductors. I mean, for those who don't know, that's maybe the single most complex supply chain and geopolitical battleground in the world right now.
It really is. So their experience there means they understand systems, leverage points, tech cycles, and fragility at an incredibly high level.
And then you pair that with deep investing expertise, which is really all about managing complexity and risk. They describe their starting point for analysis as the first principles foundation.
That is the absolute cornerstone of their methodology. Starting with first principles means, deconstructing complex problems down to their fundamental building blocks.
The truths that can't be reduced any further.
The immutable truths. And this is critical because it fosters clear, independent thinking.
So how does that first principles method help combat bias? Because bias is the silent killer of effective analysis.
Well, they argue that bias creeps in when assumptions are layered on top of other assumptions. You get these complex narratives you can't really test. By starting with the building blocks, their data-driven process is designed to strip away those layers.
To remove cognitive biases and the political or emotional narrative.
Exactly. It lets them view the system as a machine where cause and effect can actually be quantified.
So they take this expertise and they combine it with a very modern analytical toolkit. I was struck by their use of technology here.
It's a powerful hybrid. They're students of history and cycles, but also sharp observers of the world and markets. They combine the timeless principles of nature with the modern power of machine learning.
And machine learning lets them continuously test and refine their strategies. It provides that objective feedback loop their Kaizen principle demands.
It does. And this whole synthesis of principles, history, and technology leads to the core organizing structure of their entire framework, the pillars of power.
This feels like where it all comes together.
It is. They argue that throughout history, if you look at the Roman Empire or the British Empire, three major spheres have always formed the basis of geostrategic power. These are the three pillars: technology, energy, and money.
That's a critical insight for the learner. How do those three pillars determine who controls the world order?
Well, the sources draw a clear historical line. The hegemon who leads in all three of these interlinked spheres is the one who controls the global architecture.
Like the post-World War II American order.
Perfect example: mastery of oil, which is energy, control over the global financial system, which is money, and dominance in computing and military advancements, which is technology.
And those systems aren't separate. They're self-reinforcing. A breakthrough in energy tech immediately impacts the flows of money.
And that reshapes geopolitical power, exactly. So their primary lens for assessing any global event is to ask, how does this impact the balance within the technology, energy, and money pillars?
It moves you from just reacting to headlines to understanding the underlying systemic shifts.
That's the goal.
So let's connect this back to the biomimicry and the water analogy.
Yeah.
How do the pillars of power fit into their system, which they describe as having a filter and a framework?
Okay, so the first step is the filter. This is where they apply that first principles thinking. The goal of the filter is just to parse the actionable intelligence, the signal, from all the overwhelming noise.
Okay, so the filter helps them see the big waves, to know what matters on a fundamental level. What's the next step?
Once filtered, that data moves to the framework. And the framework is the ability to place that signal into a broader systemic context. That's the pillars of power at work. It helps you understand how that signal fits into the bigger picture.
And they reinforce this with the concept of the fractal, which they say is key to understanding cycles. How do they explain that?
The fractal analogy is so powerful because it illustrates self-similarity at every scale. Think of a river system. Tiny streams run into tributaries, which run into massive rivers.
The pattern of flow is similar at every level, just scaled differently.
Exactly. They apply this to financial cycles. The same basic fear and greed pattern you see in one day of market volatility is often reflected in a 10-year economic cycle and, a 70-year generational cycle.
That immediately gives you permission to zoom out. Daily volatility might feel like total chaos, but when you zoom out, you see it's just a smaller ripple on a much larger, sometimes predictable wave.
And that's the key takeaway. By viewing the pillars of power through a fractal lens, you stop reacting to the ripples and you start capitalizing on the tide.
Which brings us to why they're launching this framework now. They argue this fourth turning is not just turbulent, but a moment of massive opportunity.
Yes. They explicitly state that while this winter phase of the cycle is defined by disruption and pain, it also forces systemic change. For the person who has awareness and a clear framework, this chaos creates massive opportunities.
It's a time when old, inefficient structures collapse, creating space for new, resilient systems to thrive.
That's the idea. They've built a framework designed not just to survive this disruption, but to strategically profit from it.
So let's transition now to the actual output, the strategies and content they offer to put this all into practice.
Their output starts with content designed to organize your mind and separate the signal from the noise. The first is the Pillars of Power newsletter.
And I'm guessing this is the more time-sensitive product.
Correct. It's their regular publishing effort designed to connect the immediate dots across technology, energy, and money and help you order your mind amidst the daily chaos.
And their second content stream is the white papers. These sound more like the deep, foundational materials.
Precisely. The white papers are the enduring pieces. They cover their process, the global system, the nature analogs. These are the tools that provide the foundational knowledge for how systems work, independent of daily market moves.
So the content builds the awareness. Now, how do they apply this to actual financial decisions? They have two distinct investment strategies. The first one is called Cascade.
Cascade is highly specialized. It focuses exclusively on the money pillar, specifically the dynamic flows of money or liquidity.
Liquidity, how easily capital moves.
Right. They see it as the potential and active energy in the financial system. It's the lifeblood that affects every asset class.
So Cascade is all about mapping that liquidity cycle. What's the goal of that strategy?
The goal is systematic. By meticulously tracking the liquidity backdrop, the strategy aims to select what they call the fastest horse, the asset class with the highest potential return at each point in the cycle. It's an absolute return strategy.
And now we get to where they bring all three pillars together, a strategy called Confluence.
Yes. Confluence is the strategy designed specifically for this generational shift we're in, the fourth turning. It focuses on the interconnected pillars of geostrategic power: technology, energy, and money, all at once.
So unlike Cascade, which is hyper-focused on liquidity, Confluence is looking at the long-term structural transition happening across all three systems. The portfolio would have assets in all three pillars.
It would. And by balancing that exposure, they aim to build a portfolio that benefits regardless of which pillar accelerates first, since they're all interconnected.
The technological advance needs energy and capital.
The portfolio is designed to accelerate progress and, critically, to capitalize on chaos. When disruption hits one pillar, their awareness allows them to shift capital to the other two that will inevitably benefit.
It really sounds like a holistic approach. Common sense system analysis rooted in first principles, using this Pillars of Power framework to guide your decisions.
Ultimately, the objective for you is simple: to understand the core mechanics of how things work. Their primary focus is equipping you with the knowledge for clear, independent thinking so you can make more informed decisions, whether they're financial, professional, or personal.
This entire deep dive has been an exercise in filtering, really. We've taken their foundational sources and tried to distill their core beliefs. What's the ultimate message that AquaVis delivers back to you, the individual learner?
It connects right back to their starting premise, but it becomes a call to action. They reiterate that the system uses manufactured complexity to drive confusion and increase control.
And their firm exists to do the opposite, to simplify, to empower.
Returning that agency and decision-making power back to you. They aren't interested in maximizing clicks or engagement. They state their focus is on enlightenment, not mere engagement.
And that leaves us with their powerful concluding thought, a kind of mandate for navigating this chaotic age, which really builds on everything we've discussed.
Order your mind. Harness your money. Shape your future.